Hey guys, before we get into the video, quick shout out to the sponsor of the channel. Starting off with Imperium Duelist, they have everything from sleeves, dice, mats, everything you can think of for TCG apparel. Use code SAKO10 for 10% off. And then Dueling Guard as well, use code SAKO5 for 5% off. Hey guys, Lucas Sako here. Today I have a tier list for the January 2025 Yu-Gi-Oh! Metagame. This is going to include every set up until this point. And today I'm recording this on December the 24th, Christmas Eve. So if you guys have any comments or anything, just keep that in mind. This is for the current format. There is nothing with the Supreme Darkness set in it. But let's go ahead and just hop right into the video. The first one is that I wanted to go over Centurion. This is a deck that we saw a little bit in last format with the just slow pacing of the game, as well as there's things like Fuwalos and Mulcharmy and Droll and Shifter and all those kind of cards, floodgate hand traps. This deck plays through very, very well. However, we're not in a format like that anymore. We're in a format to where all of the hand traps that we're really playing, like Ash, Valor, Imperm, Ogre, they're trading one for one, like very, very often. And this deck does not do very well through hand traps like that. And so because of that, I think it's time to put this deck back in your binder. I don't think this deck can see competitive play right now. Maybe in the future it can, but right now it's definitely not in a state where it can do that. The next deck is the Cashtira Fiend Smith deck. I think this deck is really, really cool because it gets to utilize Dominus Purge. That card is phenomenal. We were really sleeping on that card in previous formats, but the main reason that card is fantastic right now is because, one, it's not a monster, right? It's a trap card, and so things like Cross can't stop that. Things like Called By can't stop that. And then things like Crossout probably won't be able to stop that because you're not going to be playing your own Dominus Purge to counter theirs, you know? And so this is where that deck really shines. Being able to hit something like Dominus Purge, destroy the Duo Drive, really, really impactful. As well as the deck has a pretty good grind game. I'd say it's like a very high tier 2 deck. I don't think it's definitely one of the top decks yet, but it's definitely one of the high tier 2 decks. Moving on, we have Labyrinth. This is a deck that I kind of overestimated at the beginning of this format. I think this deck had a little hype going behind it, but it kind of died off pretty fast. The main reason this deck had hype was because it had the infinite ability to cycle D-Barrier. But as we found out, D-Barrier, it's pretty easy to win the game still when you do get D-Barriered in the Riso deck, especially if you're playing the other engines, as you can see down here with your Riso deck. And because of that, I'm going to put this down in tier 3. The next deck going forward is the Malice Fiend Smith deck. So Nico, the European player, he's been playing this deck a lot and showing it off. I wanted to go over it. I don't think this is the most optimal way to play Malice. I think it's a very interesting way, but I think when you do that, it opens your deck up to the one thing it doesn't already lose to, which is Bestials, right? The deck plays phenomenally through Bestials. In fact, if you Bestial me and I'm playing Malice, I'm probably going to dap you up, bro, and give you a nice high five because thank you, banished effect, you know? But now that we have Fiendsmith cards and there's a lot of people running Bestials, we're just kind of opening ourselves up to get hit with those, and it makes our deck a little bit more vulnerable to something that it wasn't already. Because of that, I'd say this version, it's still probably better than Labyrinth, but I don't think it's pushing into the tier 2, pushing into tier 1 because of the restraints and like weaknesses it opens itself up to with that engine. I understand the purpose of it is mainly to play around Nib because that is one of the main factors that's holding this deck back right now. But there's just a couple different things that I disagree with that engine. Oh, brief second I want to talk about. You guys like this little Moki back here? He's pretty cool. I've had him for a while now, but I finally got some shelves, so I'm going to stick him up there. And then when I get my my plaque coming in, like the card holder from Anaheim, I'm going to put it right behind me. So I'll have some background stuff now. Moving on, we have the Malice Cashtira deck. I think that this is probably the most optimal way to play Malice at this point in time. It gives you the ability to, one, punish hand traps really early, which is what this deck kind of struggles with. A Valor, an Imperm, an Ash. Like really early on your Dormouse or your White Binder, it feels really, really sad. Another thing is that some people think that like setting like a Terraforming or like even something useless, you know, setting an Imperm and then normal summoning your guy is a good enough bluff to stop them from hand trapping you early. Absolutely not. I am throwing a hand trap as fast as I can on a stupid Dormouse if they set a card. Because the only one that's really going to punish me is TB11, which is a 1-of, right? If they have GWC06, they can't activate it at all. If it's MTP07, it's going to, one, waste a name and then search for something that doesn't really do anything because the deck doesn't have any extenders, you know? And so it has to be TB11 to really have any effectiveness there. So that's something to really keep in mind when you're looking at if you want to interact early. The Cashtira cards do punish early interaction, as well as they are 2 additional bodies. It can also be like part of your inboard if that's what you're wanting to do, while hurting your opponent's grind game. One thing that's really important for Malice is playing correct into a grind game, because what's been happening a lot that I've noticed when playing the deck and playing against the deck is that their turn 1 combo can go fully uninterrupted. They're going to end up paying around, I don't know, 2,700, maybe more life points, right? That's a third of their life points gone. If you can find a way to not like break their board, you don't have to fully break their board and kill them or do everything, but if you can set up like a half board and even just leave them with a half board, in order for them to play again, they're going to have to pay another, I don't know, 2,000 life points. And then if you combine that with something like a nib or like 2 good hand traps that are able to stop them from killing you on that turn, all you have to do is really clear their field. Because now that they're down, let's clear their field and do like a little bit of damage. If they're down to like 1,000 life points, it is so hard for that deck to do anything. You just have to like really punish them down. And so the Cashtira cards are a really good way to like generate advantage turn over turn and help kind of counteract that. So that's something that I really like about these. It also is going to hurt your opponent's grind game. So it kind of evens it out there. And you don't really need any extra deck requirements with the Cashtira cards. I think that this deck is honestly the best way to play Malice at this point in time. I think it's better than the Cashtira Fiend Smith deck. I'll put it at high tier 2. Moving on, we have the Malice Sky Striker deck. This is like the other variation that people are playing. I think it's good. I don't think it's better than the Cashtira version, but I think it's definitely good. I'd probably put it right behind that. My main issues with this is that it's going to open yourself up to losing to Droll. So now you're not losing to just Lancia or Fuwalos or Nib. You're also losing to Droll, or like not losing to it maybe, but you're definitely getting highly impacted by Droll. As well as these cards really don't do all that much when it comes to doing something on their own, right? If I open Unicorn and a hand trap, or a Unicorn and a card that gets imperm and I don't have a way to play, the Sky Striker cards aren't as good as playing through that, because you have to play really, really hard into Nib or any other like high impact or even low impact hand trap in order to get anywhere. With the Cashtira stuff, you can decide if you want to go for like a lower impact board if you have a lot of non-engine. So like I can go Unicorn, normal summon something, get Veilered or impermed, right? And then just make IP and summon back Unicorn. That's still like a good amount of disruptions, right? Because we're going to rip their extra deck the first time when they hand trap us, if it's a Veiler or an Ash or whatever it is. Then we're going to rip their extra deck again. Imagine they're playing Fiend Smith Riso. They just lost their 1 Duo Drive and their 1 Requiem. They're playing Detonator Control now, you know? Really, really impactful cards into the Fiend Smith stuff. But like the Sky Striker engine, if you go to play more, you're getting hit with the hand traps and you're not really having a way to punish them. You have a way to extend through them sometimes, but it doesn't really do all that much. So that's my take on the deck. I think it definitely is like still very high ceiling. There's definitely not as many bad things about this deck as some people think. It has a way to clear itself. My other issue with this deck is that it actually forces your extra deck to become less utility oriented. So like you can't play IP in a lot of the Wisp because you have to play a Kagari, you know. With the Cashtira build, you don't really have to put any extra deck requirements in there. So that's something that I would definitely take into account when choosing which build you want to play. The next build I see here is the pure build for Malice. We're going over all the Malice stuff right now. I just think it's the best way to do it. I'm going to go ahead and put this just slightly ahead of the Fiend Smith build. I think that earlier on into the format, when there really wasn't anyone playing the Fiend Smith cards with their Malice stuff, it might have been switched around the other way because people weren't maining Bystials at that point in time. Now it's a little bit different, so I think that the Malice pure deck is probably a little bit better, but it does still have the consistency issues it had before. It doesn't have like the amount of non-engine it needs. It doesn't have the amount of pushes it needs, but it's still like a very high-end deck. I'll put it like top of tier 3, maybe even the back of tier 2, but somewhere around there. Moving forward, we have Momento. I love this deck a lot. I have said that so many times on the channel. This deck is phenomenal. The only thing that this deck has going against it is Shifter. Good news, Tenpai basically got banned in the way that we were playing it previously, right? So the whole activate Fuwalos, activate Shifter, activate Raigeki, activate Lightning Storm, normal summon Chandra, that's gone, right? Very, very, very few people will be playing the deck that way. And that was the main thing that was holding this deck back. We do still have Malice, which is playing Shifter a lot, you know. They're playing Shifter either in their main or side deck, you know. However, you're not going to be always playing Shifter, and to be honest, the Momento deck plays pretty well through the pops that the Riso stuff provides. The only thing that this deck has going against it, like I said, is the matchup spread through a tournament. If you go into a tournament like a YCS that has 11, 12 rounds of Swiss, and you're playing Momento, it's a little bit scary, because you're going to play against 2, maybe 3 Malice. If they draw that Shifter in your match, you automatically lose that game. So you're not playing, like, so the math on Shifter is that you draw 33% of the time, right? So let's just say that's once per match. You're now playing every Malice matchup in the terms that you have to 2-0 them. Theoretically, right? It's not always going to be like that, but that's like a good way to think about it, in my mind at least. You have to 2-0 every Malice you see, because they're going to draw Shifter once per match. Obviously, it could change a little bit. They could draw it twice per match. Could be worse. They could draw it once per match. They could draw it 0 times per match. But overall, like a mathematical spread of it is they're going to draw it about once per match. and that's going to make it a lot harder on you to go through a tournament. I think that if this deck is playing against Riso, it has a phenomenal matchup, and it'll probably win close to 65% of the time, going first or second. But for right now, because of that, I do have to put this a little bit farther back, just because there is so much Malice in the format. Going on, we have Mermail. You got to stick this back in your binder. Too many hand traps right now. You're going to normal summon Neptivus, and you're going to feel insane for about 30 seconds until you send something, you get Veilered, right? You go Dragoon's Effect, you get Ashed. Then you go, like, summon Teus, pitch a random thing, try to extend, you get Veilered again, and then you're just done, you know? 3 hand traps, like, early on into the Mermail deck, it's pretty tough to deal with, especially when you're throwing away your hand. You're throwing away a lot of resources, and those graveyard effects are also getting stopped. Not to mention that deck still does have to deal with Full Wallows, has a hard time through Shifter. I just think there's a couple things going against this deck right now. I think it's a pretty cool deck, but I don't know if it's the best. Moving on, we have the Magical Musketeer Fiend Smith deck. This deck is funny. Shout out to Schmidt for playing this, but this deck it's funny. I don't know if it is definitely the best way to play the deck. Play Fiend Smith, play cash cards. I'd say it's probably a little bit better than Labyrinth. Probably a little bit better than the Malice with the Fiend Smith stuff, but I think pure Malice is probably still better than this funny pile of cards. I really like that this deck interacts very well going second. So like you have like a very good chance at breaking the board. My only issue with it is it feels like the boards aren't strong enough, and it seems a little bit too inconsistent. I feel like a lot of things have to go right, and your opponent may have to misplay in some situations for you to win. That's my only problem with the deck. Moving on to Ubell. I love this deck with my very soul, but it's not good right now. We have one Phantom of Ubell. It's hard to recycle it. Just it is what it is. If you get hand trapped and you have to use your Phantom of Ubell, it's going to be a pain in the butt to get this back in circulation. Not to mention, like, your opponent doesn't have to be scared of anything else, right? They don't have free extenders that are coming out of the graveyard anymore when you're playing against this deck. And so I think that because of that, this deck's going to fall back. We did get more copies of Gates, but we lost Phantom of Ubell. And let's be honest, that's probably what should have been hitting this deck. That card is broken. That card should not have been printed the way it was. Moving on, let's do Rescue Ace before we get into all the Riso decks. I think this deck is terrible. I know I was putting it up here, but it's really bad. Too many things have to go right for this deck to be good right now. It doesn't have enough starters at all. You can technically play the Riso cards in Rescue Ace, and you can make the Battling Boxer rank 4 to search for your Airlifter. The only problem with that is then you can't go into any of your link plays. You can't make an SP to protect your Turbulence, and that's going to be like the main way that you're going to be playing this deck, right? Because you only have 3 copies of Airlifter. You only have like 3 emergencies. That's your starters, you know. You have a Rhoda. You have 7 starters in your deck now. So that's like the main thing that's holding this deck back in my mind. Moving on into the Riso stuff, we have Pure Riso. Pure Riso is absolutely one of the better decks. I think that this probably fell back from Tier 1 to like a very, very high in Tier 2. Just because of this deck. The Riso Fiend Smith build is absolutely broken. This deck has so much utility. It has so much grind game. It has so much potential to play through things like D-Barrier and its loose conditions previously, as well as it just offers a lot of high-end ceiling. If you're looking at getting into Riso right now and you have not played, play Pure. The Fiend Smith build is actually pretty hard to play on a high-end competent level. And if you're playing with the Fiend Smith cards wrong, then your deck is going to be worse than a Pure deck. However, if you're playing with the Fiend Smith cards correctly, your deck is going to be better than the Pure deck. That's the way I see it in my mind. If you're going to play proficiently with the cards on a higher end level, play the Fiend Smith stuff. If you're not confident in them, play the Pure. And then we have a couple other decks here. One I want to talk about for a second, I think is actually super slept on, is the Riso Cashtira build. And this is not going to be what you guys think. You're not just summoning Unicorn, adding a birth. And you're going to be thinking to yourself, like, hey, doesn't that conflict with X because now you have a level 7, not a 4? Kind of, but you can still play. What a lot of people are looking at doing is they're summoning Unicorn. They go Unicorn effect. They're adding Theosis. They're going to go Theosis, summon Fenrir, and then Fenrir gets to add a Rise Heart. What that's going to do for you, one, it's going to punish hand traps because Unicorn is absolutely phenomenal this format. You're going to be ripping Requiems. You're going to be ripping Duo Drives, Detonators, taking all of that away from your opponent permanently. Second thing it's going to do is it puts a Fenrir on your field. So one thing that I talked about earlier in this video is Bestials are in a lot of main decks right now. If they Bestial you, having a Fenrir to instantly remove the Druid from the field is phenomenal. It's really going to help when you get like interacted with a Druid Swarm. It's going to stop them from being able to make Chaos Angel. It's going to take that option away from them. As well as like in this build, the Bestials aren't as good against it. And so Bestials are just going to be super punished being in the main deck. The other thing it's going to do is that now that you have Fenrir, Fenrir is going to add a Rise Heart, which is a free level 4 extender. You can special summon it all you want. If you're locked into only Xyz, do you care? You're not playing Fiend Smith cards, right? You don't need to access like links in your extra deck. You only have to Xyz. So I think that honestly this build is pretty good, and I think it has a really good matchup into the Fiend Smith build of it. I think that a lot of people will start leaning more towards this as opposed to the pure build, just because it offers a little bit more diversity. You can still play things like plug-in in this deck. You're not as restricted in your extra deck, which is really cool. And this also offers like a few more utility things you can do. Like you can use plug-in to revive Shangri-Ira, which is really cool because you're basically summoning a Fenrir from your deck with a plug-in. Super cool interaction, things like that. And then the last deck we have here is Tenpai, Fiend Smith, Bestial, Cashtira, Kitchen Sink, whatever this deck is, right? Big pile of cards. This just topped the Little Rock Regional. Trifanovsky just topped with this deck as well. I don't know exactly what regional it was, but I think this deck is actually a lot better than people think it is. I think it's a tier 1 deck. I legitimately think that this deck is better than pure Rizel because of its ability to go second, right? The Fiend Smith cards are great at breaking boards. Fenrir is great at breaking a board. Bestials are great at breaking boards. And they're going to use all 3 of those into your card. They're going to throw them at you. They're going to break your board, break it apart, battle phase, activate Singing Kaiman, and you're dead. It is what it is. It's really cringe. They're going to do all of it. They're going to break your board, break your board, activate Singing, or the Temple, whatever it is, the field spell effect, search Genroku, summon, battle phase. It's really cringe, but it is probably the best way to play Tenpai. It's definitely better than it was last format. I think that maybe we should have been playing some variation of an actual engine with Tenpai for a while now. Now seeing how well this deck is performing, I guess that is the main thing to look at. But if you guys want to look at a deck profile for this, you can check my channel out. I got Alex Cancel's deck profile from Little Rock, Arkansas Regional. But this is my tier list for going into the format. If there's any decks that you think I missed, please leave them in the comments down below. I can give my honest opinion on them. If you want to try this out for yourself, I'm going to leave a link in the description for this. That should be it. I wanted to tell you guys Merry Christmas. Like I said, I'm filming this on the 24th, so Merry Christmas to you guys. I appreciate what you guys have done for my channel and me personally so much. We've grown a really good community here, and we joke around a lot on this channel. I really appreciate you guys joking around with me. Getting to meet you guys has been phenomenal. Getting to interact with people who really respect my opinion, and then I get to meet so many cool people who watch me and value my opinion, and I value you guys, and I just wanted to go over that. Sorry for the little useless spiel there. But I appreciate you guys. If you want to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, I'd appreciate it even more. And I hope you guys have a great day and a Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.